Calling the Port Hueneme City Council regular meeting to order here on February 5th, 2018. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Fake?
Here.
Councilmember Hensley? Councilmember Sharkey?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Berg?
Here.
Mayor Schnapp?
Here. So we will begin with the flag salute, followed by the inspiration by Mayor Pro Tem Berg.
Have a seat. It's always a challenge to think of something clever to say when you're doing the inspiration. Sometimes you just maybe say an Our Father and a Hail Mary and let's get at it. I came across some, well, what I believe to be fundamental truths not long ago to start the new year. So with your indulgence, I'd like to share what I came across. 18 of them for the year 2018, I guess, kind of works well. First one is wars. Whether they're between individuals or country, almost never make us richer or happier. Reading the internet all day won't make you any smarter. Sending more emails and texts won't make you more productive. It's your right to speak your mind. You have an absolute right to say whatever you think is true. Other people may not like your views. Tough. Friendships are more important than politics. And so are sports, dinner, church, dogs, and most hobbies. Racism is wrong, no matter the color. Judging people because of their skin color is wrong. This is always true, no matter what the color is. Knowing how little you can control in your life makes you smarter. The beginning of wisdom is understanding how little you can control. Animals and humans are closer than we think. You're responsible for yourself and your family. No matter how many public safety agencies government bureaucrats invent, when it comes down to it, you're responsible for yourself and your family. And it's best you know that ahead of time. Trust in the law of unintended consequences. It's like gravity. It's an immutable law. Electronic devices can enslave you. New and improved electronic devices rarely improve your life. Often they enslave you. No text message or media post is ever worth interrupting a meal with people you love. Your security is the government's only duty. The U.S. government has only one duty: to secure the well-being of American citizens. I question how many people who work for the government actually believe that. Charity begins at home. Before you send a check to fight malaria in Congo or sponsor a Syrian refugee to come to Seattle, ask yourself why so many of our fellow Americans are living on the street or dying of drug overdoses, and then ask what you can do. Human nature never changes. Laws change, customs and beliefs change, a lot changes. Human nature does not change. If it tastes good, it's probably bad for you. We should avoid any food that makes your mouth water. Your relationships are all that count. In the end, all that really counts is relationships with other people. No matter how successful you are, if your kids hate you, you've failed. History happened. Whether you like it or not, accept it. And finally, raising good kids is the most important job we'll ever have. If you want to make the world a better place, raise decent children, preferably a lot of them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, I would like to, I don't know what the proper word is. If I want to go to the Housing Authority, I'd like to then suspend the council meeting at this point and open the Housing Authority regular meeting. Normally that then follows our city council meeting, but noticing there's a few folks in our audience from one of our housing locations, it might behoove us to do that. So let's go ahead and open the Housing Authority regular meeting tonight, February 5th, 2018. May we have the roll call, please?
Member Fig?
Here, do we have a member, a citizen member of the commission here?
It's typically Johnny Brown.
We got two alternates sitting here.
Well, I'm here, but I'm just wondering if,
He's not.
okay, you've received notice that they wouldn't be available? No?
Member Brown? Member Hensley?
Here.
Member Sharkey?
Present.
Vice Chair Byrd?
Here?
Chair Schnall?
Here, we have the agenda before us.
Move to approve.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. We have item number 3, consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent?
I move to approve. Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? All right, so motion carries on consent. And then we have item number 4, new business, and that is the authorization for out-of-state travel. And so with that, are you going to introduce this, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, I don't see Gabby here this evening, but this is
She was here a second ago.
Oh, there she is.
Great. Yeah, wouldn't you come on up and walk us through this? This is something that really complies with city policy. Anytime an employee is going out of state for any kind of training, job-related training, the council needs to approve that. So Gabby will tell you just a little bit about what this specific training is all about.
Good evening, Chair, board members. This training is called UPCS. It is for our public housing developments. It is training for myself and another staff member to attend. Mostly it's all administrative training that we are asking for you to allow us to attend. It will allow us to get more knowledge as far as how to up our scores when our inspectors come down from DC this summer. And we are anticipating an inspection sometime at the end of July.
Okay. So are there any questions from the council? Yes, Ms.
Thank you,
Councilmember Fig.
Madam Mayor. Gabby, does this deal with the Section 8 housing quality standards? Is that really the focus, is to be current on those parameters for our public and Section 8 housing?
There are different inspections for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. That is called HQS, which is Housing Quality Inspections. And it's totally different from public housing. So what we're going for training would be on the public housing aspect of it.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is that hopefully in the next month or so we'll be having some discussion regarding resurrecting, reinvigorating our housing rehab program. And as I recall, the guidelines are largely based on the housing quality standards of HUD. So, you know, what I'm thinking here is that this would equip housing authority staff with knowledge that they might be able to assist in the implementation of that program. Like I said, that's a decision yet to be made, but that's coming down the pike here. And so I'm looking at this as maybe a complementary training session that could help us resurrect that program.
We do have 3 staff members that are certified housing quality trained as far as the Section 8 program is concerned. HUD is coming up with a new way of inspections, which is going to be the UPCS for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which will be implemented within the next few years. So when that does come along, we'll definitely send staff to training at that time.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
I
Yes.
probably would fit better into board comments, item number 5, than this specific travel situation.
Okay, so with that then, is there a motion?
I'd
on-
like to make a motion for approval.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so motion carries. Thank you so much for the report. So we move on to item number 5, board member comments. And Councilmember Hensley?
Madam Mayor, thank you so much. Good afternoon there, Gabby. Chicago is kind of cold at this time of year, isn't it? Doesn't the lake freeze over?
It is. I do anticipate it to be very cold.
Oh, okay. 3 things here that I'd like to find follow-up on. The smoking shelter outside, what's the advance report on that? Are we getting any groundwork done on this?
We will be starting that project within the next month.
Okay. Also, the no smoking policy within, have we accomplished that, or is it still dragging on and going through the battles?
The no smoking policy that was in effect is working. We currently do have code enforcement monitoring the building after hours, and that has been extremely successful. So thank you so much to them. We have had one resident who has had violations, and we are definitely working with that resident in order to correct those violations.
Okay. I don't advise kicking them out for that. I mean, it's an infraction, but we need to impress on people to follow these rules. If they want to commit suicide, they can go outside and commit slow suicide. Any other critical issues within the HUD buildings over there, particularly at Mar Vista, that we should know about, or is it pretty copacetic?
I believe everything is going okay. We did have an issue with our cable box over the weekend for Super Bowl, but thanks to staff, we were able to get a cable company out there on Sunday morning and fix that issue.
Now, following up on issues like this kind of ignites a little quick short question here. Number 1, do we have Wi-Fi for them, or is it cable? Number 2, do we have Wi-Fi access for at least 2 computers in there that people can use? Number 3 is smart TV. What's the possibility of that?
You know, that is definitely something that came to mind during this time where our cable went out and we had no Wi-Fi access, and with technology changing so rapidly, it is something definitely that I will look into the future. We will be getting ready for a capital grant again, and I will be presenting that to you in the near future, and that can be something that can be added.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, are there any other board comments? With that, then, we move on to open forum. Anyone wishing to speak to the board on any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time. So as we're still in the Housing Authority, is there anyone who would like to speak? All right.
We're just here for the fun of it.
Okay, well, welcome. So with no one wanting to speak during open forum, there isn't a closed session for Housing Authority. So with that, we will adjourn the Housing Authority to the next regular meeting to be held on March 5th, 2018 here in Council Chambers, following City Council meeting. So we'll go back then to the City Council meeting. We left off at, I believe, the agenda.
Move to approve.
Is there a second on the agenda?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So motion carries. We then have item number 5, which we will see on our regular agendas, and that would be reportable actions from closed session. So with that, we'll go to Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is one reportable action from tonight's closed session on item A, which is the performance evaluation city manager. The City Council determined that a full discussion would take longer than was available this evening, and so it has directed staff to set a special closed session for Tuesday, February 13th at 10 a.m.
All right, thank you very much. So then we move on to open forum, where we have up to 30 minutes for anyone that wants to speak on any matter not on the agenda. I do have some speaker cards here. I believe they will take maybe less than the 30 minutes, and so I'll call you in order as to when we receive them. So first up, we have Johnny Adamson, and he will be followed by Bob Tatum.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Pro Tem. Nice meeting you. Good guy. Okay. Anyway, I'm here representing the Port Hueneme Historical Museum, which is located at 220 Market Street in Port Hueneme. If you haven't been to the museum, please come by and see us. You'll learn a lot about the city, especially things that can impact today. History has a way of repeating itself, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I just wanted to brief you on an upcoming item we have. We're going to have a Miss, let's see here, Rosa, let's see, what's her name? Oh, Dr. Colleen Delaney, right? Delaney, yes. She'll be discussing Santa Rosa Island. So if you've never been out to Santa Rosa Island, it's really something to see out there. Also, again, it tells you a little bit of the past that happened out here. They found a lot of historical bones and things out there. So this will be on February the 10th at 11 p.m., or 11 a.m., I'm sorry, 11 a.m. at the Port Hueneme Historical Museum. We'd like to see all you there if you can make it. Also, every first Sunday of every month, we have rock painting classes. The second Sunday of every month, we have sea glass classes for women who like to make jewelry out of sea glass. That's really an interesting class. The third Friday, we have the historic harbor or port tour, which you can actually go in and see how much the port impacts the city here, which really does the city and the nation. Pretty much if you get I'd say a banana this side of the Rockies, it's coming from Hueneme. And so that's just one to kind of let you know. The third Fridays, or Sundays, I'm sorry, we have knot classes. We have a gentleman comes in and teaches you some handy knots to use in everyday life. You know, you can use them for all kinds of different things. And let's see, on the fourth Sunday, we have scrapbook classes where people come in and we have a theme for the week or the month, and maybe beaches or parks or something, and people bring all these photographs together and put together collage. It's really kind of a neat deal. Just if anybody doesn't know, Hueneme is the second oldest city in Ventura County. The oldest city is Ventura, and that's because it's got a mission. Okay, anything else? Okay.
Now, you have another speaker card. Did
Yes,
you
ma'am.
want to, you had a personal comment?
Yes,
then?
ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, this is just me being a personal citizen here and observing things maybe not worth a powder blow it up, but whatever. I'm just going to voice my concern and opinion. Several meetings I've attended here, the police department has requested raises, and I think the city needs to look at what they're earning now, because the general comment and the general feeling of the community is they're getting well paid, better paid than some of the local communities around the area. I have nothing to base it on, but that's what I heard. Also, I think with these marijuana dispensaries coming in, it's almost like living the past again. Back in the past, we had card rooms here, we had gambling houses here, and it got so corrupt, El Gelati Sheriff's Department came in and took over Hueneme Police Department and relieved all the Hueneme police because it was so corrupt. What I'm saying is we're opening the door to another type of influence in our community that could impact our whole city. The city here is a nice city. It's a small city. Police response is excellent with the community. I'm just saying that take a look at what we have and be thankful for what we have instead of trying to reach for that carrot. Thank you very much.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. So the next speaker I have, speaker card 4, is Bob Tatum, and Bob will be followed by Jerry Garon.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mayor, City Council, City staff, citizens. Well, I come here a lot different than I did the first time. I was introduced to the city by Mr. Hensley, and he excited us about the possibilities here. And then we began forming relationships with everyone here, and we fell in love. And I'm happy to announce that Freedom First is now open and has been going through a series of soft openings since January 25th. We have addressed a number of issues along the way, and one of them is cleaning up the area. And we have security guards, armed security guards on staff every day, and we have been able to eradicate a lot of the riffraff that's been hanging around in that alleyway there behind the building. We're watching it constantly. We're running guards through around the building on a 30-minute basis at this point. Saturday was our true opening, and we had over 100 telephone calls come in to us about the excitement for a medical cannabis dispensary to be here in the city. We're the first one in Lower Ventura, and we're targets. But the good thing is that we had almost 100 of them come in to the shop, and 50 of them were new members to our business. We're very proud of what we've done so far, and we really believe that we're helping a tremendous amount of people. I have approval by Chief Salinas, who's been really helpful through this process, along with Tony and everyone else, to have an open house for city council members, which will start tomorrow at 7 o'clock through 8:30, and it will also be on Wednesday, 7 o'clock to 8:30. We've also invited the Port Hueneme Police Force to come in, and also the Oxnard Police Force, because we're hanging right on the border. And we will also invite city council members, interested ones from Oxnard as well, so that they get a better perspective of what we're doing. You don't have to be according to approval from Chief Salinas, you do not have to bring in a medical card or anything else. This is a closed door session just for you. I do want to caution you, I've heard about the Brown Act. You may want to coordinate your schedules so that you're not in violation of any of that. But we really are anxious to have all of you, and we'll have coffee and non-medicated refreshments
Thank you.
So please join us tomorrow and Wednesday at your convenience, and thank you for letting us come into your city.
Yeah, well,
Madam Mayor,
congratulations. Yes.
That's 7 p.m.?
From 7 till 8:30 p.m. Right.
PM. And the address?
You can dress any way you
No,
like.
I mean, your
Your address.
I often do.
Oh, the address.
2675 North Ventura
You
Road.
got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Any other questions? Or?
Are there any comments or questions here? Okay. Well,
Other than to say welcome, we look forward to your success.
yeah.
Thanks. We do too.
Yeah, congratulations.
It's been a
for
long
being
road.
here.
Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you, Bob. And then next I have Jerry, I'm sorry, I think it was Garen. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, homeowners. My name's Jerry Guerin, and I'd like to make a few comments regarding the proposed building project at the corner of Surfside and Market. I am a homeowner and on-site manager at Anacapa View Beach Homes Association here in Port Hueneme. I have been a resident here for the past 15 years. I'm sorry, I'm reading because of the time. I timed this out. It's 3 minutes and 20 seconds, so I didn't want to go over. And I'll try not to be too funny. My wife and I bought our retirement home here in Port Hueneme about 15 years ago, before we retired, obviously, because you can see I was not ready for retirement 15 years ago. In what the realtor called the hidden jewel that we did not know about, and he brought us down here and we agreed and bought a house that day. We're retired teachers, and as homeowners, we're very concerned about our community and the value of our own home. I would like to address the proposed condos and offer some suggestions. I emailed this information to the city planner as well as to the city council. I have since amended my comments a little bit, and if you'd like a copy, I will be glad to email it to you again. When the city proposed building the 2 high-rise condos adjacent to the pavilion 10 years ago, I was in favor, as many of my neighbors were not. I was in favor because I felt the city needed the insurgence of the tax dollars and also for the businesses to revitalize our community. I was in favor because I thought the project offered a lot to the city, including the development of low-income housing. I was also in favor because I felt it would not negatively impact the value of our homeowners' property. This new proposal, however, I feel is quite different. Other than the obvious concerns for loss of view, declining property values, traffic, vandalism, and crime, I would like to defer to the thoughts of my cousin, a respected and architectural engineer. And I asked him what he thought about this project. He was involved in the design and building of Levi Stadium up in Santa Clara. I recently saw him and asked him about what he thought, and here's his thoughts. His company likes to stay away from projects that receive a high volume of negative community response. Building next to a federal property requires a lot more planning, surveying, security, time, effort, and cost. Building in an area where flooding is an issue, which we had 3 years ago in this area, requires additional planning, surveying, time, effort, and building and cost. Also, the California Coastal Commission is not approving projects that involve building on the coast in areas that are subject to flooding due to their concerns of rising sea levels and global warming, and they have stopped issuing permits in Florida and California. So what do we do instead? So here's some positives. First, I'd like to suggest a community committee of homeowners to be formed, and the committee could be comprised of community members with real estate, accounting, real estate development, and community development for low-income homeless with experience in those areas. As a retired teacher, I don't have experience in any of those, but I would offer to be on that committee as a secretary or in any other way that I could serve to help. Next, I'd like to suggest building a park similar to the one near Marina Beach in Ventura, directly in front of our homes at Anacapa View Beach Homes Association on the Sunkist property adjacent to Surfside. This would give children and adults an area to play not directly in the sand but close enough to the beach to be able to walk, including small water features similar to the one at Pacific View Mall, and picnic and garden areas would make this a very attractive area. It would take advantage of a property that's currently not being used for other enterprises, and perhaps we could work out a deal with Sunkist for the property. I'd like to also encourage building shops and restaurants near the beach, but not directly on the beach. Some suggested areas would be the parking lot next to the pavilion, the land east of Surfside 2 and 3, and near the seafood restaurant. Long Beach Harbor and Ventura Harbor have both done this and been very successful in doing so, not only making the area look a lot better, but also enhancing business opportunities. Pacific Beach is another example. They are 5 miles away from the freeway. The only way to get to Pacific Beach in San Diego is by surface streets. Yet by using the introduction of businesses, shops, and restaurants and hotels, they have made that area very attractive to tourism without ruining the view and without impeding on the value of the homeowners' properties. Finally, identifying and investigating areas that need development and what could be added while servicing our low income and homeless population, including but not exclusively revitalization of our downtown area, which I hear in the past was a very, very nice downtown area. It is my understanding that the city did have a thriving businesses in that area, and perhaps a new downtown could be modeled after the downtown Ventura revitalization project. I don't propose to be an expert. I'm only a homeowner with a vested interest, but I am willing to volunteer my services any way that I can to make our city better and also to protect this hidden jewel that we all have and we know as Port Hueneme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and if you have copies of your revised, you can leave them here with our city clerk.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council on any matters not on the agenda? All right, so seeing none, we will move then to item number 7, presentation. And we have our first presentation here, a proclamation recognizing Emily Berney. And I know Emily is here in the audience. And if I could read this, because this is very appropriate to be taking this time out of the council meeting. So we have a proclamation of the Port Hueneme City Council honoring Emily Berney for her leadership in the community. Whereas from December 4, 2017 to January 12, 2018, the Thomas Fire, now the largest wildfire in California's modern history, torched 291,893 acres and destroyed 1,063 structures in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. And whereas before the fire was even contained, a large windstorm rolled in from the Pacific on January 9, 2018, and the resulting mud flows above Montecito killed 21 people and closed down a stretch of Highway 101 used by an estimated 15,000 daily commuters. And whereas Emily Berney partnered with Chris Collier to launch ThomasFireHelp.org on the morning after the Thomas Fire started. And whereas Berney, who put her own successful Visionality business on hold on December 5, 2018, was uniquely qualified to assist her hurting neighbors. And whereas for the past 7 years, her company, which now boasts 9 team members and consultants, has been providing nonprofit management, event coordination, project management, marketing and communications, strategic planning and evaluation, as well as bookkeeping and accounting services to an impressive list of clients. And whereas a point of pride for Port Hueneme is that Visionality got its start in 2011 in the spare bedroom of Emily Berney's Surfside One condo. And here is the ultimate notice. Whereas ThomasFireHelp.org, conceived of as a community-based solution to the Thomas Fire and the Montecito mudslides, connected volunteer airplane and helicopter pilots to patients and doctors who couldn't afford to waste time on alternative routes to the 101, and help residents connect with nonprofits and volunteers, solving their immediate needs with respect to food, short-term and permanent housing, and securing caretakers for their animals. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Port Hueneme commends Emily Berney for her commitment to the community, her astute leadership, and passion for helping others. Emily, can you join me at the podium?
Hi, Hueneme City Council. Thank you for having me and thank you for this recognition. It was a scary day when I launched my business in Surfside One, and I'm really excited to be where we are and in a place that we could make a positive impact in our community. And speaking on behalf of my business partner, Chris, and all of our tons of volunteers, I want to thank you very much for the recognition and for the opportunity to make a difference. So thank you.
Now, I did have a couple of questions. How many total individuals did you work with? Because I know you were recruiting volunteer pilots and transporting people back and forth between this area and Santa Barbara.
Just in the pilot program? So we ended up with 63 airplane pilots and a helicopter, and we ran, I think, 84 missions. So each leg from one side of the mud to the other was a different mission, and we flew over 100 people. And we flew doctors and patients and critical personnel as far north as Stanford and as far south as San Diego and a whole bunch of places in between.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Are there any other comments from council members here? No? All right. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right, good night. All right, then we move on to 7B, presentation of concerts at Hueneme Beach. And with that, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, we'll have our presenters come on forward now. I think Jim Gilmer is part of that presentation. We do want to say up front to the council that we are kind of going outside of our normal process a little bit. Normally, the applicants or the folks interested in presenting a special event would go through our special use permit process, get approval from the council at that time. We are kind of going around that process a little bit, or getting a jump start on that process, because, as Mr. Gilmer will share, there are some very time-sensitive aspects to this, and if the council is not interested in or supportive of the event itself, they don't want to waste a lot of time and resources and money that would otherwise be wasted if they have to make commitments this early on. So we acknowledge up front that we're kind of, in some sense, putting the council on the spot, and we don't generally like to do that. But you'll see as Mr. Gilmer presents why we're doing it this way this time.
So at this point, it's just a presentation?
That's right.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, welcome, Jim.
Well, good evening, Mayor Schnapp and members of the council. And Mr. Butler, thank you so much. And Tony, for your open door communication with us. Let me give you just a contextual background for this project. Myself, Jim Gilmer, Joe Surgener, and we have other members from our group here, Genesis Health and Wellness, and Lit Foods, and many of our other collaborative partners. As you know, we're working toward becoming one of your premier medical cannabis industry leaders in this city, and hats off to the new dispensary that's here. The businesses are really interested in giving back to Port Hueneme, and so we're excited about that. This all started as a result of myself. Many of our members attend, local churches and mosques, etc. But at my particular church, I had a pastor come up to me, and right at the end of November, and his daughter expressed extreme need in the island of Dominica, which is in the Caribbean islands. And these situations, however horrific we may have seen Hurricane Maria, you never know how close you are to these things, And so I had no idea about Dominica. I never even heard of Dominica Island until this pastor, mentioned it to me, and his daughter was reaching out for help. And then I saw this YouTube video of the Prime Minister of Dominica breaking down in tears right after those disasters, similar to the things we've experienced here in Ventura County. But this island is not highly publicized. It was in the eye of the storm and was totally devastated. I mean, and you can go on and on and on with those stories. I'll send you some links. However, garbage trucks, immobilized, totally devastation. And the more I got involved in it, it really touched my heart and my spirit. And being the compassionate people that we are, and like most of you here at the council that I've worked with in the past on compassion work, when you're faced with that type of situation, you have to try and do what you can. So I went to our colleagues here in our community, and we came up with the idea of trying to do whatever we can to assist the people in Puerto Rico and Dominica for whatever reasons. I came up being raised helping the homeless, and when it wasn't very popular. And folks would say, well, you need all these long forms to feed someone and go through all the rigmarole of case management. And there's some validity to that, but I'm from the old school where you feed someone and get them well and provide that compassionate service and then do what you need to do. So we're reaching out with that same type of urgency and intention. What we like to do is, first of all, let you know that long after the publicity, there are still many deaths that occurred in Dominica and Puerto Rico. People are still missing. The recovery time is years and years and years and billions and billions of dollars. And so through my colleagues and friends in the music industry, promotion industry, We've been really blessed to have this come together so quickly. The Snoop Dogg Tour has agreed to come to Port Hueneme. And for whatever reasons you may think of Snoop Dogg as some, radical person, he's a very compassionate man and does a lot for communities. From youth football programs to many things down in South Central. And through Joe and his contacts, he's agreed to come here and actually gave us a nice discount. So what we're proposing, again, we're dedicated to Port Hueneme. When I've heard that you lost your beach festival, I attended that thing every year. The first thing I did when we joined with our group, I said, well, let's find a way to try and help bring back music and festivities to Hueneme Beach, because those were some of the best festivals I've certainly attended. And so here's a way that we both can accomplish helping the city of Port Hueneme, bringing together people in the industry, businesses in the industry. We're going to go to them as well, because hopefully they can become vendors, be involved with safe access publication, education, as well as provide resources for a wonderful music event. So again, we have Snoop Dogg Tour, which is him, a bunch of other musicians. You'll hear from Joe, and maybe even Robert might have some other update. But we have a local and nationally level musicians. And what we like to do is raise money for Puerto Rico and Dominica. We like to do it at Lot Area B, primarily at the beach, and fence that off really well. We've talked to Tony Stewart and the police chief. They've given us some really good guidance, and we're open to make this, number one, a family-friendly event, a safe event, and hopefully for us, we'd like to raise, funds for the cause. And how we're going to do that, obviously, if you've done any special events, ticket sales, you can't count on ticket sales. So we're going to do that through sponsorships and vendors and a text to give sort of link for people who can just give whatever they can, $1, $10, $5, and be able to get that money over to the folks who are faith-based organizations, primarily in Dominica. And we hope to continue that relationship, on an ongoing basis as well. I'd like to turn it over to Joe. Do you have any comments? If there's any questions. I should mention that we will have, we've asked Port Hueneme to help us with security. And I understand that through capacity needs that they would also, bordering Oxnard and Port Hueneme, they would ask Oxnard for some help with traffic control. And then we have our own MK Enterprises security that representatives here in the audience, they provide high-level security for people in royalty and Middle Eastern priests, kings and princes and all that kind of stuff. Sort of like presidential level security. And then we'll use general, just general security in the area. We want to come out of this with an excellent event, a first-time event, but we hope to do something like this on a regular basis to bring, use our revenues, use our resources, as someone said, to bring revitalization back to Hueneme. And I think with Market Street and the whole area that we're going to be situated at, that someday you're going to look back and see that this place has really changed. People walk in the street, music, restaurants and shops, and a festival every year. We hope to do that. So Joe, if you have any comments, questions?
I'd like to open up to the council for any questions you guys may have. I'm kind of the organizer, pencil guy, so.
All right, so let's go ahead and see. Yes, Councilmember Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you for attending. Thank you guys for coming up with this concept. Just a couple of short little questions. Number one, what is the anticipated cost on behalf of the city to help put this on? And what type of compensation do you think we may get back?
So we are planning on incurring all the costs to the city, and we are setting aside a nice financial package and budget for police officers as well as outside assistance, and as well as for you know, explorers, police explorers to help us with, you know, parking and things like that. So we are definitely trying to use as much as the community resources as we can to fulfill all the different things that we need to accomplish for this event, including like porta potties and things like that.
Second question, actually the third. In the process thereof, are you planning on reaching out for advertising on a California-wide basis or locally basis? Can we anticipate, that leads to the next one, how many people do we anticipate bringing in for this?
So we are planning on doing some social media campaigns, a 30-second spot commercial. We have Cuba Gooding Jr. and Omar Gooding Jr., who are friends of ours, who are planning on meeting up with us Thursday to kind of talk about some bullet points, if it goes through with you guys, to figure out how we can actually impact and create awareness about what's going on in Puerto Rico and in you know, Dominica. But as far as to your question, I'm sorry, what was your question again, sir?
The number of people that we may anticipate coming into the city itself and spending time.
So this event, we're trying to keep it small numbers because we want it to go smoothly. We're expecting 2,500 to 3,000 people or so. We charge ticket prices, and we even did a VIP section. So there's some like expensive area for porta potties, nicer porta potties, clean porta potties for people, things like that, and sinks and stuff. So we made it so it would be, you know, it would be a little, you know, it'll cost a little bit of money. It's not going to be 10,000 people there showing up.
Okay, to me it sounds like a good proposal, and I don't know if this is time for, I think we have to bring it on the agenda, do we not, to vote on it, or can we come from this?
Yeah, we do. We have to put it back on the
I
agenda.
suggest we consider this and get kind of a budget off of them of what they're anticipating. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have any other questions?
Yes. Hold
Well,
on.
not questions. Do I have the
Councilmember
opportunity to make comment?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. I'd be a lot more thrilled if the money stayed local.
Okay.
I'm a Port Hueneme first kind of guy. You talked about homeless. You talked about the loss of Hueneme Beach Festival. We're in the hurt locker, and our single biggest asset is our beach. And we would love to promote our beach for the benefit of our community.
Absolutely.
And so as much as our heart goes out to those that have been victims of circumstances beyond their control, and that's not limited to the Puerto Rican area. We don't have to look too far on the Thomas Fire and around here. So my inclination is I'm not thrilled about making our single asset available for money that's going to leave the community. So I would like you to think about that when this council takes up the matter for consideration, because we have our own needs here.
Absolutely.
Thank
Can I
you.
respond to that?
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
And thank you for that comment, Mr. Fig. That's why our company is working hard to be a permanent business here in this community. This is just one event, and we plan to give a percentage of our proceeds back to the city, and especially to local organizations in the city. We've been meeting with Steve Kinney and Tony Stewart and the city attorney as well to just negotiate those items. We're totally dedicated to giving back to the city, not only from a percentage of gross sales, but we're going to do our own charitable giving internally within our organization to give for many, many years to come.
I'm looking beyond your business proposal for a cannabis medicinal operation.
Sure.
I'm talking about this particular event.
Okay.
Okay?
Certainly. Thank
So
you.
we'll look forward to hearing your financial package.
Okay.
So I have, yes, Councilmember Sharkey.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, it's more a question for staff. Typically, when we have use permits for events at the beach, we have, there are conditions regarding protection of beach assets and things like that. I'm assuming, I'm assuming this will be a pretty standard CUP for this, and the usual conditions will apply. You know, 2,500 to 3,000 sounds like a reasonable number. I don't know if, you know, the crowd control issue is something I'm very interested in. I don't know if any more than that would show up. sometimes might happen. You know, if your promotional efforts are that good, you know, my experience as a promoter was, you know, we can get into that someday. Yeah, I'm just, my concerns are crowd control and maintaining control of the crowd and the standard conditions on any use permit that protect the beach there itself.
Yeah, we've been working very closely with Mr. Gomer and his team in terms of explaining the fact that it's really not just the city, it's potentially Coastal Commission in terms of, you know, restrictions to the beach caused by this event. So we've talked extensively to him about that. He's graciously agreed to make some adjustments over this past couple of weeks in terms of which parking lots are used, location of stage, several of the key aspects of the event because of those very concerns.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
I know you don't have an exact date yet, but when do you want to do this?
Yes, April 14th.
So we have a hold.
You do have a date.
Yeah.
We have a hold between April 13th and 27th for Snoop, and so I just was trying to, you know, find something that was.
April. Yeah,
if we did it the following weekend, it would have been the 420 weekend, and I was scared that if I did it on 420 weekend, we'd have way too many people show up. So.
Tax day.
Also on April 20th, that weekend is Coachella, and so many things are going on. 300. We just left Palm Springs area.
Got it.
300,000 people going out there.
Yeah.
We want some of them to come over.
I see. I did have a question too. So would this be a one-day event that we're looking at? And then it would be the Snoop Dogg tour, so I'm assuming it's going to be quite a bit of performers. How long do you think the time frame for the event would be?
We're looking at noon till dusk. Yeah, kind of the same hours you did the beach festival in the past.
We wanted to clean up early.
Yeah.
I echo the sentiment of there would be, you know, an opportunity for help coming through for this community. As,
sure.
You know, we're going to be taking a look at our updated budget. Things don't look better, they look worse for us. And so just keeping that in mind.
Sure.
I know we're all one big community as we look at the world and all the areas that have been affected by, you know, hurricanes and mudslides and fire and all. And so it would be great to see something then result for our residents here.
Well heard.
As we're taking the impact for, you know, busy streets and everything else, that it would be something that we can certainly partner with. And so
sure.
That would be my
We'll work
my
with
concern.
city staff to do that,
Yeah.
to review that.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, we're not making any approvals tonight, but we're recommending then that it come back as an item on the agenda?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that the council is certainly open to the concept of the event, pending your review of the specifics, and I think that's basically what we were looking for tonight. So
Yes.
with that, we'll bring it. They'll be required to fill out all the normal paperwork for a temporary use permit, and that will come back to the council for approval. But I think they've got, you know, the basic indication that this is an event that the council will be open to under the right conditions.
All right, and that's what I am understanding. Is that correct? Yep. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, very good. Thank you for
Thank
this
you.
opportunity
Thank you.
to work
Appreciate
with you.
it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks. All right, so with that, then we go on to presentation item number C, and this is presentation on the REACH fundraising project. And so with that, we have Mr. Kinney.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Steve Kinney. I'm here in my civilian capacity this evening as a resident of our city, and also as the current chair of the REACH Board of Directors, to help remind the residents about REACH. That name is an acronym that stands for Recreation, Education, Arts, and Culture in Hueneme. REACH. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was organized really out of motivation from this council of a couple of years ago in an effort to find an alternative means of raising funds for the call them softer programs, if you will, in city terms that often fall to the bottom of the priority list when times are tough for city funding, yet everyone recognizes how important they are to the well-being of the community as a whole. So let's see if we can find another way to raise the funds to support those programs. That's the motivation behind REACH and the genesis of its creation. Excuse me. We really look to this year to be the year that REACH takes fire, so to speak. You all have done your part to contribute the resource of one of your members, Councilmember Fig, to sit on the REACH board, and we had a meeting a couple weeks ago to really try and get the ball rolling this year. You'll see on your agenda later tonight, we've proposed 3 community leaders who are all willing and eager to join the board to expand its capacity and size, and we'll be meeting actually later on this week, hopefully with those new members involved, so that we can really start to map out our strategies and goals for the year ahead. But certainly one of the things that we know that we want to go after, and the centerpiece of our planning right now, is a fundraising project around bricks. Bricks at the Beach, which we would like to have take place later on this year. And really the mastermind behind that whole project, and the person who has driven the organizing of all the ideas and who has helped shape the issues for the board to grasp it well enough to try and make some decisions to move it forward, is your own city clerk, Michelle, who has done all this in a volunteer capacity, and she's really done a terrific job to bring this to where it is right now. And the best I can do right now is get out of her way to let her give you a little presentation about what this project is all about, and just look to you for some encouragement and hopefully your endorsement of the whole idea in concept. I mean, it's sort of like this, what we just went through. We're looking for a conceptual blessing tonight, and then we know that during the course of the months ahead, we're going to have to come back to you for specific approvals on things. But tonight, we just want to lay out the idea, get some enthusiasm going, and hope you'll all be nodding your heads as Michelle goes through her presentation. Thank you.
Mia.
Yes.
But before you leave, Mr. Kinney, when is our next meeting?
In about 48 hours.
Oh, it's tomorrow evening?
No.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you gave me a 2-day notice. Okay.
Okay.
An introduction to this program or project that we're proposing. It's a Hueneme project, and as Steve indicated, it's the REACH fundraising campaign that we're proposing. And it stands for Recreation, Education, Arts, Culture in Hueneme. And as Steve also mentioned, we had
Speak into it.
Sorry. Board meeting, their first board meeting with their basically new council member or new board members in January. And what we went through is the project plan, the objective of what they're raising funds for, the location, and pricing. So the objective is to raise about $30,000 in 2018 for REACH-sponsored programs, activities, projects, and events, just like they have been doing this past year, for movies in the park, senior luncheon, youth programs, beautification of our beach and parks. So that's what the purpose is. We identified 5 locations, all in order of preferred preference based on just having it right at the pier would be kind of the most ideal spot. So right here is site 1, which is if you're facing the pier, it's to the left. So it's the entrance to the pier. Then the second desirable spot would be to the right of the pier, right behind the restaurant. There's kind of a good spot. This is the rendering. So as you're, coming towards entering the pier, it would be to the left, so it'd be an ideal kind of location. Right now, there's nothing there. And the area is about 20 by 4, which holds about 340 bricks. So site 1, like I said, is to the left. This is a rendering of what it would look like. Of course, the garbage can is not going to be there, but right now it's just open space where we're not using it. It's just sand. So there's actually a nice vast area, which would look nice there. And then the second site, which is behind the restaurant, is actually an existing location. So if you look here, it's like almost like a viewing spot off of the path. And there's several of these along the path so we're kind of wanting to use the existing area and keep with the same style. So it's going to be, of course, the pillars will be the same. It'll match all through the city, what we already have. And this location, like I said, already exists. They just have to take out the concrete. And then for future, there's additional sites here. There's 2 other sites. This would be, this number 3 is at the intersection right behind the restrooms. There's a spot there. And then there's the promenade, which is a much larger area. And that's site 5. So just like I stated, here's another one of those like little viewing areas that we can utilize for the future. And then another potential spot is right behind, again, the restaurant. There's just kind of a small little area that we could transform that if we need the space. And of course, if we're hugely successful over time, we could transform this whole entire area into donor bricks. But I'm sure that'll take a little while for us to get to that point. And then the selling options are a 4x8 and an 8x8 in 2 categories. This is the 4x8 kind of sample. There's also the corporate level. Of course, it's going to be a little more expensive because we're advertising for businesses, and there's a sample of the 8x8. So what's coming up? So we, as Steve mentioned, we have a board meeting this week on April 7th, and they'll be discussing details of refining the mission and other projects that they want to raise funds for. Internally, we're working on a webpage and brochure to advertise and start selling these bricks, and also putting in procedures and processes for taking in donations. We can, if all this is complete, can begin selling by the end of February. Site preparation, I guess about 4.5 months, because site preparation we need to do by the end of the summer for installation in September, which would be kind of the unveiling of that area. And these are the board members currently, and there are also 3 that you approved in the consent agenda of our new board members. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions,
Okay,
happy to answer them.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions for either Steve or Michelle at this point? Yes, Councilmember Fig.
Not a question, just simply to once again compliment you for a quality project that you've put together. I know that's taken a lot of time, and your good work I think will pay dividends down the road. The one suggestion I might have, and maybe I'm getting ahead of the design process, is that I saw the isolation of the preferred site, which is at the entry to the pier, that normally with bricks, these kinds of celebratory displays, they're to be walked upon. And so I would suggest you consider connecting to the sidewalk there so that, it encourages people to go out, find their brick, or to, take names and numbers. Just a thought, I'm probably ahead of myself, but I saw that as kind of, oh, you put it out in the sand and there's an isolation, so something to think about. I think is an awesome idea, ambitious. So you're looking to start selling at the end of February, is that correct? Wow, awesome.
Yeah, really, the good thing about this project is it's forcing us to get organized really quickly. There's a lot we've got to do internally just to be ready to underwrite and support this project. As Michelle pointed out in the checklist there, the procedures that we've got to get for accepting donations and credit card transactions, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're really starting the organization from scratch right now, so we're on a fast track to success, I'm sure, by September when this all comes about. And let me just mention, by the way, I know everybody knows the concept of the BRIC fundraising projects, but if you aren't aware, the CB Museum has gone through this itself, and they have a very attractive plaza there. We're patterning our project after much of what they've done there. No reason not to build on, proven success. So we're going to go after that. And we're using some of the same vendors and all that. So we're learning a lot from their experience, but it's a very attractive area there. If anyone hasn't seen such a project and would like to see it in real life, that's what ours is going to look like by later on this year.
Very good.
Dare I ask, will a coastal commission permit of some sort be necessary? Oh, I shouldn't have asked that question.
We'll be looking into that maybe a year from now or so. No, I don't know. We'll check on that.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Berg.
How about sand out on the beach? Are these going to get covered in sand? How will they be maintained?
Well, that's why they have the border around it, that protects it. And also it's part of their regular maintenance schedule. I talked to Dawn, and it's not such a huge area that it would take up any additional time for them at this point.
Thank you.
I know that Ventura Pier launched a big project about 20, 25, maybe even 30 years ago. The same kind of effort along the entrance from the street onto the pier. Yeah. Looks very nice. Yes.
May I ask Mr. Kinney a question? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Attorney.
Mr. Kinney, I understand you're selling corporate bricks as a part of the project?
Yes.
Okay. And would corporate include limited liability partnerships?
For an additional fee, it could, yes.
Well, you probably just blew your first donation. I now have an additional condition. I would be happy to commit my firm to purchase the very first corporate brick on the condition that you personally lay it.
Oh.
Done. Done, sir. Thank you very much.
Is that a challenge? Challenge accepted. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Kinney? Yes.
I just want to say, I hope that doesn't turn into a trip hazard. That brick.
Oh, the one that's right.
Oops.
Oh. It's a win-win.
Yeah, that's right. A win-win-lose.
All right,
Yeah.
so at this point, we were just listening to the presentation, and the organization continues to move forward with new members and board meeting then.
So, yep.
All right, thank you,
I just wanted to
Michelle.
mention one last thing that I'm sorry I didn't mention before. You saw the list of board members now, but I also want to acknowledge Ken McDonald. Ken is just volunteering his time to attend the meetings and has volunteered to serve as the treasurer very appropriately for the organization. So even though it's a separate account and all the rest, I mean, it's great to have, such skills volunteering to keep us out of trouble on the financial side. So
All right.
appreciate that, Ken. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thanks,
for your time.
team. All right, very
Thanks,
good.
Michelle.
Thank you for the presentation. With that, we move on to item number 8, consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so motion carries. We move on to item number 9, Finance Director reports and comments. Mr. McDonald.
Hi, I wish I had cheerful news, but after reviewing what we had in the original proposed budget and what little changes were made between now and then, we've come up with a mid-year budget revision. Unfortunately, the deficit has increased another $480,000, but it would have been a lot higher if not for some savings that were materialized and recognized in here. A couple of the big items, for some reason, the community benefit fund, the $200,000 that we're getting from the port, was included in the general fund. it could have had the expenses in there, but I couldn't find them separately, so I'm hoping that that's gonna be the case. I didn't have a corresponding 200,000 reduction on the expense side, but the revenue contribution coming in there is no longer in there. It has its own separate fund, 270, which is probably like page 19 in that budget packet. Another item is we had originally estimated 375,000 coming from the cannabis revenue. We've really conservatively looked at what will be able to be open for the remainder of this year and had to downgrade that by, I think it was 219,000. So just those two alone equal 419,000 of that additional 480,000 deficit by revenue reductions. And then on the expense side, we had that settlement that we had to contribute to the CJPIA for that insurance settlement. That was another 200,000. That is now reflected in the budget. That's another 200,000 added onto that. And then due to the injuries that we've had in the police department and covering that backlog of work, we've estimated another 266,000 in overtime would be needed to continue out through the rest of the year. So just those alone, if we didn't have any other improvements or savings, that would be some 800,000+. So we were able to reduce those down. Some of the good news is we have revised sales tax estimates that come from HDL. That just came in last Tuesday. They've been very good, both here and other organizations I've been at, for their accuracy in estimating what those revenues will come in at. We've had some additional property tax revenue come in, not quite as large as that, so that's reflected in there. And most of the expense side, we went through and tried to analyze and see what those really will be between now and June 30th. And so a few of them we've had to do some increases, some of them we've had to, been able to do some decreases in there. There was, the one comment in question, I think it had happened maybe a month or two before at the council meeting. Councilmember Fig had brought that up too about personnel and staffing. We started working on that, got some of that done today and was hoping to present it tonight. I wasn't confident that it was 100% accurate, so I want to give it some more time, and I'm hoping to bring it back in 2 weeks at our next meeting and be able to kind of really reflect what those personnel items would be and actually make it as a correction to the current budget book that we have online, because some of those, I think it was originally negative 21 employees in 2016-17 for a proposal that was put forward to contract out the landscape maintenance and eliminate some people. That wasn't actually done, so when that wasn't done, the proper procedure would have been to make those adjustments to the budget and then re-present it to the council, even if it's receive and file, you know, reiterating what you had previously done. And so what happens is, looking at that, it looked like we dropped 20 employees, then bumped them back up, and I don't think that's the real effort. We've been going through and adjusting those, and we had about 8 or 9, but I'm not comfortable with those, so I want to be able to get those in there, put some names to that, and basically have our human resources department heads, everybody that's familiar with the names much more than me, only being here 3 months, to be able to really come to that. So when I bring that to you, it will be accurate to without, you know, repute. So that's the plan that's coming forward. I did a couple quick presentation or PowerPoints just to kind of show the breakdown of where the general fund revenues are for this current year and what they're reflected in, basically shapes of a pie to show where the biggest revenue sources come from. My intention was to include this in an understanding the budget. It was a 4-page booklet that kind of explained the budget to the general public and anybody interested, and I think it was last done at 14-15. When I was trying to get these slides to go into that same space, they weren't really legible on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So I'm going to have to kind of jigger with the overall format. But this is the type of stuff that I'd like to put in there. I think Tom had brought it out that it was a good, helpful document. When I started reading it, I thought it was real helpful too. So I want to get that updated and presented back and put it online, so anybody seeing, they would be able to look at that, then look at the budget document, and at least have more than a beginner's method of kind of analyzing where we're spending our money and how we're spending it. There was also another one that I put in there with the expenses to kind of show where our money comes from and where it goes to. You know, this is not uncommon in any city I've ever been at, that the police department is the majority of your general fund expenses. Most everybody accepts that public safety is the most important thing that a city can provide to its residents. This is reflected in the budget with the level of expense that we have to put towards that to do that. There's, you know, our next steps and where we're planning to go. We're going to still try and keep, my hope is that those expenditure budgets will not be realized, they'll be reduced so that we'll have additional savings. We have some ideas that we're putting forward in the future to come up with a 5-year plan for, you know, not really just a budget, but a long-term forecast so we can look at some of these things. I think we've had some discussions, and last August, I think we reduced our reserve levels down to 25%, which is basically a three-month window. Try and really analyze to see how important that is and explain to both the council and the community why you would have that type of reserve level, or when it's appropriate to spend it, use it, and kind of get to a point. I know in the original budget, this one and next year's, there still is a deficit that's projected. I'd like to be able to come up with a plan that within, well, maybe this year and 2 more years out, we can start getting that balance down. Some of these items that we're taking up, both with cannabis revenue, looking at different options for increasing revenue and different things like that, to try and put all this package together with the management team that you have here and try and get this presented so that we can present a balanced budget to you. It would be 19-20 would be the next year after this budget is over. And that's not too lofty of a goal, but I think that's the goal that the council has, which I appreciate, and I think really it's prudent and responsible for an organization to get to that point. Most of this I've went through, so I can answer kind of any questions that we have. My hope is to come back in 2 weeks with the personnel side, so if we want to take action on this now, continue it later to put the people numbers behind the budget numbers too. They really kind of go hand in hand.
Okay, so with that, are there any questions from the dais here for Mr. McDonald? Yes, Councilmember
Yes,
Fig.
Madam Mayor. Earlier today, and I guess a copy was placed here on the dais for everyone, is what I consider to be the 4 or 5 items that are kind of been trailing for a bit. And, you know, this is not new, you know, to really drill down on our reserves and to, you know, we have a deficit, structural deficit that seems to kind of move. I know that we have, unforeseen contingencies, like, as you pointed out, a rather large settlement that, that added to our burden. You've already talked about personnel, but I've had some longstanding questions about the Surplus Property Authority, its interrelationship with our ability to continue to receive tax increment trust funds, if in fact there is a connection, and whether it's prudent for that loan that was made between the general fund and the Surplus Authority to be brought back to the general fund. That's a question that's been out there for quite some time. I think it was Madam Mayor that had some concerns regarding our strategic plan and making certain that we're accounting for all of the activities that have been budgeted. A good part of that is the community enhancement monies that flow from the Harbor District, but there are other sources of funds that come within, that come into play under that plan. So I think that's something that we would like to continue to keep a track on, because some of the activities may be no longer relevant, and we may want to reprogram some of the monies that were originally allocated, so that would be helpful. We also had an eye-opener with our unfunded liabilities and pensions and long-term health care issues. And one of the things I thought we left that discussion back in October or thereabouts was the idea of beginning a pre-funding of those long-term liabilities. It's one thing to show that there is a huge number out there in our comprehensive financial reports, But it's another thing to start planning for that eventuality. And if we are going to be successful in promoting some sort of a tax measure come November, I think it's important that we include all of those potential liabilities so that we truly have a structural deficit figure that can be understood by all, and that it's all inclusive, so that we don't say, oh, we forgot to include this 2 years down the road and have to go back out for another ballot measure. We also talked about assessment districts some time ago when, in our normal annual budgetary process, when we renew the assessments, that we're not getting full cost recovery. And I believe that question was asked of our Public Works Director, and it was my recollection that we would have had that information by the end of last year. But I guess what I'm telling my council colleagues is that I think that there are several areas beyond just the personnel issue that are deserving of additional attention. Now, I don't know if that's possible to be accomplished in 2 weeks' time. I have to defer to you on that, but these are very relevant matters, and it's certainly, I would hope, if the council agrees, that those are matters worthy of further research and analysis, that we have the benefit of that information before we really begin to drill down on the next fiscal year, or I guess in the May timeframe when you intend to bring back the second increment of our 2-year budget. It would be helpful to have this information in hand by that point in time. And I think what I have to do is ask my colleagues here, does that make sense to you? Are those topics something that we want to charge our staff with in that kind of flexible time frame that I've indicated?
Well, let's see if there are any other questions.
Fine.
Yeah, please, thank you. So, Mr. Hensley, do you have any questions for Mr.
No,
McDonald?
thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Berg?
Yeah, you'll be, in May, we'll be looking at this again then, right?
Yeah, usually by the second, middle of May, you usually get a lot of more accurate estimates for revenue for the next year. So the only advantage to waiting to maybe the beginning of June is just to get more of those estimates come in. But that's usually that's kind of what I'm hoping to do. I mean, I could put together an estimate for next year, but without updated revenue estimates, it's going to be better to do that closer to the end of June. One of the things that I would like to comment to Councilmember Fig is his perception of the financial responsibility of the council from a finance person like myself. It's music to my ears, because a lot of times you don't have anybody addressing those points, and the points he's addressing are very, very important and very critical, and we've been addressing those. Your strategic plan, a lot of these things that are going on. When I came and was looking at the city before I got here, these were a lot of the things that impressed me, that this was a good town to be in because they took their management responsibility serious. You know, these unfunded liabilities, they're created from it's a whole combination of items, but they were created from everybody that was employed before today and in the past. So my recommendation, whenever I've dealt with this, a lot of times more expenses added onto the budget is not what anybody likes to see, but as a finance person, that's my recommendation, is that you need to basically cover those current expenses. If you can factor in what that future cost would be, you should budget that in your current budget. I had set up one where we funded one before. Rod was there as my city manager at that city, and we had put in the current budget a contribution, what we needed per employee to fund that every year and get that addressed. And I think it was a 10-year, I can't remember because it was about 4 years ago, but it was a 10-year window to get that thing addressed. And once you get up to that 10-year point, you might have a point where, hey, we don't have any more unfunded liabilities, we have the cash. And my impression was, is if you do that type of preemptive strike on that type of item, when that 10 years comes down the road, more than likely you're going to have an excess of cash because you prepared for it in advance. By us funding these monies for both future PERS costs and any other post-employment benefits costs, these the component of the unfunded liabilities that are out there in the future, we will start addressing them, but it won't be enough. We'll have to address other things, and you need a measure to reflect it in your current budget for what you're currently expense for that you will be paying out in the future. So unfortunately, it makes it harder to balance that budget, but when you do balance that budget and you have those additional revenues, it's the mistake that the state made back when Gray Davis was in office. They thought, oh, PERS is making 15%, 13%. We can go ahead and increase these benefits, and they turned a blind eye to what future costs those would be when earnings dropped down to 3% and 4%. You know, so now they're trying to deal with that issue that was 15 years ago, but they're kind of a little bit too late. And so what they're doing is they're trying to push it up. Well, that pushing up of that meeting of those revenue estimates that PERS does for investing those funds so that we have that ability, they're doing it, and as they do it, it increases the cost for all 500 cities in the state. And it was something that was there and known, but they just ignored it and didn't want to deal with it until it got here. The whole purpose when this public pension started is it was supposed to be an equal contribution from employees and employer. So it was an 8% contribution from employees and 8% contribution from the employer. And the thought was is that that money would grow over time and meet those future obligations. It's so far from that. That's why we have these large dollar amounts that are unfunded liabilities, because they were originally proposed to be funded in the 60s when we started these pension plans. So, you know, a lot of this, they've moved forward on it by addressing it in our financial statements and quantifying it as numbers, but we've done it 10, 15 years too late, so now we're trying to play catch up. But the approach and acknowledging it, even if we can't fully fund it from what Councilmember Fig is talking about, you have to acknowledge it and know that that's where you really need to be, even if you can't be there now and it takes you 5 years to get there. But you know, I wish that the things that Councilmember Fig is talking about were easy to accomplish, but nothing that's important is ever easy.
Did you have any other questions?
And yet this was a 2-year budget. We're gonna have to start working on the following budget, aren't we, pretty soon?
Yeah.
That's coming down the pipe real soon as well.
So my understanding, though, is that about 3 months ago, we actually did set aside some money from our general fund reserves in order to set aside and invest in this area of pension obligation, correct?
Yeah, that was one response that I had to Councilmember Fig's comments, that I'm not sure I've confirmed this with the council, but just within the last couple of weeks, we did send off our first check to PARS for the trust in the amount approved by the council. So, and we've been working with them closely, by the way, to explain or to make sure that we are doing everything in a defensible way in terms of the issue that came up about enterprise funds versus general funds. So Ken's been good in working with the PARS folks on that to make sure that no one can challenge the appropriateness of what we did. But that check has now been deposited, and that is the first significant step to, you know, taking some, I think really is what Mr. Fig's getting at. Let's not just have the number hanging out there as this looming disaster. Let's try to chip away and take some practical steps now to resolve that unfunded liability.
Yeah, and I know these discussions predate you, Mr. McDonald, and our city manager, and that with our previous city manager, we were looking to then those kinds of obligations as being something we needed to tackle really soon. So I'm glad that we were able to constructively at least put this first step in place in order to address that area. So with that, it sounds like there are still some questions to be answered. It looks as though you're looking to identify budget savings, but also course correcting maybe some adjustments that needed to happen or were in the process but never really recognized here. And so you have identified that we are worse than what we expected, that we would have an additional loss of $800,000, but we are looking at maybe some additional cost-saving measures in order to continue to reduce that down.
Yeah,
Is
so
that what
it
I
was,
heard?
the net of all the savings with the additional costs was, I think, 481,000 and some change.
And that would be reflected for end of this fiscal year.
That's right.
June
Yes,
30th.
The 17-18 fiscal year, and what we said in the report also is that we'll be working to try to reduce that number even further between now and June 30th through expenditure cuts, holding off, deferring things that might have been budgeted. And the other thing to keep in mind is that number assumes that we're going to spend every dollar that's budgeted through June 30th, which is a safe way of doing it from a finance director's perspective, but that's not the real world of what normally happens. People leave jobs that we're not expecting to have them leave, so that creates vacancy savings. There may be delays in projects, either unintentional or intentional, but rarely is every dime that's budgeted in the general fund spent. So that 481 we would see as a worst case scenario, and we're going to do everything we can to minimize that between now and June 30th.
And by the same token, too, it's the same conservative approach for looking at the revenues. It's more likely that we'll meet our revenue budgets than we'll meet our expenditure budgets. And that's the kind of conservative approach I take, so that I'm trying to come with you with a recommendation that will be 1.5 million deficit, but I would probably bet my own money that it's going to be probably $1 million or maybe even a little less. It won't be that high. And I'm really tight with my own money. So I don't bet with it.
And so we will then see a revision then. You're going to be looking at bringing something back to this board.
There's
when?
two options. If you approve the revised budget now, those are the changes that we would put in place, and then bring back the personnel items, which won't necessarily change these numbers. The only drawback, both from your perspective and mine, is that if I have another 2 weeks, I may find something else in here. Hopefully I find something that's positive rather than negative, but you know, you have as much likelihood of finding something negative as positive. So if we haven't approved this tonight, I may submit revisions for anything that we find between now and the next week and a half, and put those in there and submit a revision to this and the personnel section too, which the personnel section basically tells the public and management staff which positions you guys have authorized to fill, and kind of goes through there. And from what was in the 2-year budget book there, you know, me coming in cold, there's no way on the outside I could tell any of that information without reviewing council minutes, talking with, you know, staff. It was not clear enough because of the proposal that was in there, and it would be nice if it was easy just to pull it out and say that it was in there, but when I had somebody going through it and I looked at it, it just didn't look right. So I'm actually going to pull it out and put names to it, so that, you know, the names don't mean as much to me because I've only been here 3 months, but everybody else that's looking at it can actually tell and see it. If it's not too fine a print, I might even bring that forward to you guys for seeing the names, so that if you know names and positions there, you can kind of see that and catch anything that somebody misses.
Right. 2 questions remaining here is there was a backfill, I believe, of Public Works, and Mr. Villafana had said that, you know, percentage would come out of this budget and another percent. So you're actually making those adjustments within the budget that we're seeing, correct?
Specifically, I was reviewing the engineer that we had in there. There was one item in there, we were going to take some of the engineer's salary from the gas tax, but there wasn't. I noticed it today when I was looking through and checking personnel, and went into the gas tax. Hey, there's no wages account in the gas tax. So there is more in there that would accommodate transferring that in there. But I basically said, all right, if we had 40% in the general fund, it was going to be 20 gas tax, 20 water, 20 sewer. Would the budget be able to handle that? It would. There's additional money in the gas tax to cover it. But if it comes back in 2 weeks, I may actually create a line item for wages in the gas tax that it would be charged directly to for that new engineer position.
So that we would be able to cover that.
Yeah, I didn't have enough time to do it without bringing a revised one to you tonight. And my lofty goal this morning was get the personnel done. If I get that done and verify it against this, and I can make revisions to this and bring it out tonight, I don't like to bring something this complex to you just to look at it and review it. But that was what I started out this morning until I got to about 4:30. This doesn't look accurate enough. I don't want to bring something to you that is not accurate and give you guys the trust and comfort that when I bring something to you, I've reviewed it, have enough people reviewed it, that it's accurate information coming forward.
And then the other question I have is additional overtime. So I know that that what usually is approved with our police department is already something figured into overtime within that budget, I think.
That's correct.
And so you're talking about 266 being addition to what's already a number placeholder in that budget.
I think it was 4 something. I'd have to look at my budget real quick.
I just want to make sure you're already accounting for the money that's that had been set aside there.
Just for space purposes, I have the current budget, which was originally adopted in the 2-year budget, plus there was a couple modifications that the council had approved for specific actions. Those are reflected in what's the current budget, and then it has year-to-date totals, which are all the expenditures through December 30th. Then it has current encumbered, which means it's a PO that's written that hasn't been paid for yet. Then there's the remaining budget that's just the current budget minus those other 2, and then a percentage remaining, and then the budget adjustments. So you take the current budget, add or subtract to the budget adjustment, and that will give you the net total. On my spreadsheet that I had to build, just to the right of the comments, that there's some sections with comments, some without, is the total column. When I tried to put that column in there, it made it a little too small, so it wasn't too readable. So that was kind of something I had to do for display purposes in there. This is an Excel spreadsheet that was used with the current accounting software. I would rather see an accounting software system that can produce those reports straight from the system. It doesn't take somebody like myself to enter data, change the formatting. There's a lot of effort put into that for our accounting software system that we got, I think, 10, 11 years ago. It really hasn't kind of kept up with what the current computer software systems are. I mean, one thing that just drives me nuts is it opens up a dialog box, but you can't make the box bigger or smaller. So you got this box that's a fixed size. Doesn't matter how big your screen is, you can't change the size. So it's apparent when you look at something like that that the system was made to format Windows after Windows was made. So if you know anything about old computer systems, it was built off of an IBM 400 series server. Very few people even have those still. And everybody refers to it as HTE, but that was the original product that got bought out by SunGard Public Sector, and it's technically called Naviline. But nobody using it calls it Naviline. And I was at the last city, they used another product that was a little bit below it, called Finance Plus and Community Plus. You actually had 2 different software systems to log into to get utility billing and cash receipting information as opposed to your finance and expenditure side. This one's kind of taken that same one and molded it together. But this company, when you look at it from a technical perspective, they've taken their old systems that they've bought and just kind of stuck them together with something else. The main general ledger module is called GMBA, which stands for Government Management Business Accounting. So, you know, a name that goes back 15 years plus, they still have it the same thing. So when a new user looks at, well, where's the general ledger section? Everything else says payroll, purchasing is kind of topical and functional, but they got this one section that's not. And it's basically because they've taken all these different software systems they've bought and put them together. So that's going to be one of the big projects that I'll be working on that I'll definitely be reporting back to you, but I want to find out what it's going to cost to get the current system up to a current product that we would like, or looking at some other systems. I know the city of Oxnard is looking at that type of situation. They have an RFP right now, so I've been in contact with a couple people over there, and I kind of want to sit in and see what type of system they pick and why. Now, they're 200,000 citizens compared to our 20,000, so the cost for their system is gargantuan compared to ours, but it really is dealing with some of the same issues for identifying and quantifying, you know, your accounting and where your management is spending and using its resources. So sorry, I got off on a tangent.
It sounds like it's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, he's passionate.
Right?
One question.
We were trying to figure which one of us was going to go tackle you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Butler.
Yeah. But to go back to your original question, yeah, the sad reality is we are including the original amount that was budgeted plus an additional 260. And what's driving that is the injuries, on-duty injuries that the chief has talked about in his reports, and he'll probably provide an update at his next monthly meeting. Because of the nature of the work in the police department, there are certain staffing minimums that have to be met. So when you have I think it's currently 5 officers out, basically 20% of our department, that requires backfilling, and that spikes your, and even there, we're doing everything we can to try to hold that down, both in the short term and maybe looking at some structural things we can change in the future on that. But yeah, it's over and above, unfortunately, what was originally budgeted.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, did you want to make
I just
a
wanted to
comment?
ask one question, because it's unclear as to me what your timing need is here. If I'm correct, mid-year budget adoptions approved by council are to make sure that you have appropriations for expenditures that have to be made that weren't previously allocated, as well as to provide, necessary information as we move forward to give the council an idea of where the city is. So if that's correct, then you don't have a pressing need to have an action tonight, although you certainly could have one, but then you would have to come back with further changes anyway. Is that where you are? Yeah. Okay, because I wasn't clear on exactly what you were asking for, and so the council is being presented with an option, which is you can, because you're in no immediate need of having to appropriate additional revenue, you can defer this or you can accept it tonight, and so I just wanted to make sure that option was clear.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So what would the council, yes, Councilmember Sharkey.
Just a thought as we look going forward on cutting expenditures. I think we still need to continue pursuing contracting wherever it's feasible, wherever it makes sense. Obviously the landscaping contracting thing didn't work out. That 20 employees issue that came up. If a city is disposing of the Industrial Avenue building, that brings into question the solid waste collection business. The state is imposing new requirements on diverting organic materials. It's going to make it difficult to start meeting those requirements as well. This might be a good time to start really getting serious about looking at whether that's an enterprise we should keep or whether we would contract it out. And there may be other areas as well, but that one comes to mind. And as we're looking to cut costs, right now I can't tell you it will save any money. I don't know, but it would be good to get the data.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then, what's the pleasure of the council? Should we defer this until Mr. McDonald can get a better picture to then present changes to then the budget that has been passed?
Well, Madam Mayor, I again would like you to address the comments or the items that I thought that were relevant to this discussion, most importantly, whether it be next week, 2 weeks out, but certainly before we engage in a discussion for the next increment, which I guess is the May and June time frame for our next, the second stage of our 2-year budget. So I would ask the council for concurrence that these are discussion points that are worthy of asking staff to further investigate and report back to us.
So I believe that what we would end up doing, if that's the case, is not directing Mr. McDonald, but asking our city manager to consider then the information that's been shared by a council member and see what what options there would be in order to answer some of these, because we're
yes,
being
Mr.
asked.
Butler, would you please do that?
Can I clarify, Mr. Fig? Thank you.
Sure.
So the options would be is that, there's clearly going to be an update on the budget. It looks like there could be some additional costs involved to the budget, increasing our deficit. But between now and then, you're going to be looking at other options about employees, the budget, what we're really going to be using versus what is planned there, et cetera. And then there are some, Mr. Fig, of your document here that exist outside of this current budget that we're looking at and looking at a revise or refresh that I believe it would be in the hands of Mr. Butler to try to figure out, you know, how we're going to present this information and come back with this. And so that's how I see it. I see it as two different things going on right now.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a
Yes,
motion
Councilmember
for the
Fig.
council to endorse the memo that I have distributed that deals with issues that have been trailing for almost a year, and ask Mr. Butler to work with his department head to address those issues in advance of our next budget cycle beginning in the May to July timeframe.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Are there any discussion? So their motion and a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Fig?
Yes.
Councilmember Hensley?
No.
Councilmember Sharkey?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Burke?
Yes.
Mayor Schnarr?
No. So the motion passes 3-2, and so we just put it in the hands of Mr. Butler to look at all the items that were presented there. All right, thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
So that is, okay, so that's one. And then we still have the alternate of the budget, correct? To see what we want to do with the budget information, the estimates that Mr. McDonald has presented to us. So,
Yeah.
so with that, is there a motion? What would you like to do? Would you like to adopt then what he's presented, or you want him to wait? We will table this for another 2 weeks until he has some better information coming back to us. My option would be is to table this and see what other information he has.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all right. Could we have a roll call, please, on that?
Councilmember Fig?
Yes.
Councilmember Hensley?
Yes.
Councilmember Sharkey?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke?
Yes.
Mayor Schnarr?
Yes, okay, so that passes unanimously, and so we'll await then an updated budget in 2 weeks. Thank you. All right, so we move on to item number 10, City Manager Reports. We have a report on the Citizens Advisory Committee, item A.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a follow-up to the council's discussion at the January 16th meeting. We got some direction from the council at that time about the formation of this new Citizens Advisory Commission, and part of that direction was to bring to an end the Recreation and Fine Arts Commission in favor of creating a new Citizens Advisory Commission with a broader mission and role than the Parks and Fine Arts Commission had had. So thank you, Stephanie Mendenhall. She has put together a quick staff report and a resolution. Fortunately, we can do all this by resolution. We don't need to make these changes by ordinance. And I hope, and the council will let me know briefly here if I'm correct, that we have incorporated into that resolution the direction that the council gave us correctly back on January 16th. A couple of highlights. Again, the Recreation and Fine Arts Commission would be terminated through this action. The Citizen Advisory Commission would have 5 members, at least to start. If there's a desire down the road to expand it, we can, but we would start with 5. Each member of the City Council would appoint 1 member to that 5-member body. Those commissioners would serve for a term ending the January 31st following the expiration of the term of the respecting appointing council member. And again, just reinforcing that the commission will be an advisory body to the City Council. So they're not running around making their own policy. They're advising the council on policy based on assignments that they receive from the City Council. And I think those were the key points. Again, it would be by resolution, so this would go into effect tonight if the council adopted it. And we would immediately begin then the process of advertising for these 5 members. And certainly people, folks who are currently serving on the Recreation and Fine Arts Commission could apply and be considered as part of that process. But anyone from the community would be welcome to apply and be considered by the council for those appointments. I think that covers everything. I'm available for any questions that the council may have.
Are there any questions that folks may have. Yes, Councilmember
Yeah,
Sharkey.
thank you, Madam Mayor. I can phrase this in the form of a question, but should we decide to expand this at some point, we'll take another resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that that's all it would be. It would be a resolution to go to 7 or 9 or whatever the council's desire would be.
Right. I'm happy starting with 5, but at some point, I really, we had discussion earlier about things in the north end of the city. I think it's really, it would behoove us to seek a good geographical representation around the city, and if that takes getting more people on there, all the better. But, to start with 5, I think that's fine, but, just like to hold it in everybody's mind that maybe a bigger commission at some point in the future might be a good idea.
So I do have a couple of questions here for this. Is that if we are having it so that we're disbanding one commission, but those that are serving on that have to reapply to be part of this, so they're not grandfathered in, so to
Right.
speak.
In the original staff recommendation that came forward last time, we were offering basically guaranteed membership to any current Recreation and Fine Arts commissioners that wanted to serve on this new body. Again, unless I misunderstood, the direction from council was no, those folks are welcome to apply in the process, but they are not going to get a guaranteed appointment on the new body.
Okay. So do they know that they have to apply?
We were talking about, we know we need to notify them
Yes,
very soon,
thank
at least
you.
the 3 that are still serving,
Okay.
that this action has been taken, that this commission, Recreation and Fine Arts, will no longer exist, and we would encourage them to apply for the new commission if they're interested, but that they will need to go through the same application process that anyone else would.
And so would it also, there's another question, would it also be as, as Mayor Pro Tem Berg and I were just elected in 2016, and the rest of my colleagues here were elected in 2014, and so their terms would come up December of 2018. Those that they would appoint would then end their term effectively January 2019.
That's correct.
Right, so
Yes.
so that it's not a full term that people are serving, but the remainder of the terms of those that are appointing them.
Yeah, that's
I just
the
want to
way-
make sure.
Yeah, that's the way the resolution is written
following
up
that.
tonight.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Yes, do you have a question? Yes, Mayor.
There's a little bit of a confusion in your action in the agenda. It's number 2. It says to approve the process for reappointment of current members as part of the newly formed commission and seek new commission members. What does that mean?
Yeah, that may have been a carryover of that original thought that we were going to offer the guaranteed membership. So we can strike that from the staff recommendation to make clear that current Recreation and Fine Arts Commission members are not.
So really, it's item number 1 that you're asking for.
Yeah, that's basically
action. Okay, well, I would make the motion then that we approve the recommended action number 1, which is adopting the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, and Jim is not here for the vote, so motion carries. 4 votes, yeah, unanimously. And I just want to make sure that for the staff that had worked on the previous presented information, I know there was a lot of time and effort. I didn't recognize city staff for what was already invested in this, and there was a kind of like a shift change here for that, but you have all moved on this very quickly, so thank you so much. And I look forward then to, hearing about who wants to serve on this, because I believe it's really important for people to volunteer for different committees in their community. Did you have any additional comments?
That's it for this item.
All right, very good. Okay, so moving on, we have item 10B, approval of community benefit fund project list. And so with that, is that you, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The council's aware, and I will just, for the public's benefit, remind everyone that as a result of the settlement agreement between the Oxnard and Harbor District, Port of Hueneme, and the City of Port Hueneme back in October of 2015, the Community Benefit Fund was created, and that's a process through which the Harbor District contributes money, assuming they hit certain revenue targets in a particular fiscal year, for community benefit projects. And there's a whole description in the agreement about how those projects are chosen. You'll recall that we had the initial allocation of $200,000 coming out of this agreement that was to be determined, the use of which was to be determined solely by the City Council. We went through a whole process last spring of deciding how that initial $200,000 would be used. We've been slow, but we're gradually beginning to spend that money, and we've worked out a process with the Harbor District for accounting for the money, and of course it's done on a reimbursement basis, which is one of the things we learned as we went through the process last year. Well, now, because the Harbor District continues to have strong revenue numbers, we have an additional $100,000. This represents the Community Benefit Fund dollars that will flow out of the 2016-2017 fiscal year, where the Harbor District once again met their revenue targets. The process that is described in the Oxnard Harbor, or in the agreement, the settlement agreement, says that a committee of the city and the port will meet to make some recommendations on the use of the money each year. Back on December 11th, a couple months back now, the Port City Joint Committee met, and that involved, from the city side, that particular day, it was Councilmember Fig and Councilmember Sharkey. Mr. Berg, who's the second regular representative on the committee, was not available that afternoon. So the city was represented by Mr. Fig and Mr. Sharkey. And based on discussion of that group with the port representatives that afternoon, they came up with a list of funding categories for the $100,000 that we have available from that 2016-2017 year. And that's listed on the second page of the staff report. I'll go through that real quickly. $15,000 for pedestrian crossing safety improvements at Market Street and Hueneme Road. And I need to talk to Mr. Villafana. He was not there that day, so we'll bring him up to speed on exactly what's being envisioned there. But that would take $15,000 of the $100,000. $20,000 for community events, which could include things like movies in the park, similar activities. I'm thinking now maybe some of the 70th anniversary celebration that the mayor is currently working with staff on and coming up with a lot of ideas on. That totaled $20,000. These categories, by the way, are intentionally fairly broad so that there's some flexibility as we go through the fiscal year in determining exactly what we can use the funds on. So again, $20,000 for community events, $35,000 for what we're calling beautification projects, and that could include things like landscaping enhancements, public art, bus shelters, variety of things that could fall into that beautification category. $20,000 for REACH and other local community service organizations. That could include the Historical Museum, which receives some money in that first allocation, Chamber of Commerce, Sister City Program. Those are just three examples. Again, nothing guaranteed necessarily to those, but anything that would be considered a community service organization could receive up to $20,000. And then finally, kind of a catch-all category that we labeled human services and public safety projects. And again, just a few examples that came out of discussion: homelessness related projects, opioid addiction projects, and then public safety, which in our case would probably be police equipment and programs, although the council approved in that first $200,000 allocation some money for our emergency preparedness guides that the chief has been telling you about. So that's an example of a safety program. That was $10,000. So you take all that combined, that comes up to the $100,000. The wording of the settlement agreement says that once this city port committee has made their recommendations, both the Oxnard Harbor District Board of Commissioners and the City Council has to officially approve those allocations. The Harbor District Board of Commissioners approved that meeting recently. I believe it was at one of their January meetings. And again, no serious discussion there or disagreement there from what I hear from the Board of Commissioners when they looked at this list. And so tonight we're at the City Council level asking if the council also approves this list for the money that came out of the 2016-2017 fiscal year.
Okay. So with that, are there any questions for our city manager? Is there a motion then? Oh.
Madam Mayor, I do have
Yes.
some questions.
Yes,
So the
Councilmember
idea
Figg.
here is a general endorsement of these categories, but specific allocations of funds. I heard something along the lines of a city anniversary celebration sort of thing. I would expect that that would be a specific project that would come back to the council within that category to be approved. Is that correct? Or are you just unilaterally going to be able to charge this account for anything that fits that category?
I know for sure it doesn't have to go back to both bodies. If it's something that can be defined as a community event, so there's some flexibility.
I'm more
there.
concerned about the council's involvement in the allocation of the funds.
Right. Yeah, and I think.
Do I need to make a motion to approve it in that fashion, a broad endorsement of these categories with specific projects and allocations? For instance, $20,000 between the museum, REACH, Chamber of Commerce, and Sister Cities program. Well, what does that allocation end up looking like?
Yeah, for each.
Okay.
That's what you
So unless there's other questions, I'd make the motion that we endorse the broad categories, but specific allocations for specific projects be returned to the City Council for discussion and approval.
Yeah, I'm fine with
Yes,
that.
Councilmember Hensley.
Thank you so much. I appreciate Councilman Figg's awareness and concern about this. I too have concern. There's a lot of good things that are replicated in here. However, we're looking at large sums of money with money that we don't have yet. We're talking about other issues that are imperatives that we have to work with. But here we're spending $50,000 anticipating, we're spending $20,000 anticipating. Sometimes when you go out to get the eggs out of the hen coop, another fowl or a fox may have eaten those eggs, or consequently the eggs are rotten for some unknown reason. And I would prefer that we hold off a lot of different spendings of larger sums of money. For example, I'm not quite sure what's going on with our Chamber of Commerce right now. I'd like to really see it get activated again, but it seems like it's lingering. I wonder about a $50,000 annual thing, and it's great, and we may have that, but I don't think we should be spending and committing the money now until we get the money in our pocket. That's my idea. Thank you.
So my understanding with the $100,000 is that it doesn't pay for, it can't pay for anything that's a line item in our budget, that these are over and above items that really might even be only one-time shots of infusion. I mean, the last time we parceled out $200,000, quite a bit of it went to research, to the water rate study, to hiring the consultants that we have on right now that are working with us through all of this, which would be like one-time expenditures, but it would be not necessarily from the items that are already in our budget. Is that the understanding that we have?
Yeah, I don't think community benefit funds were ever designed to supplant basic general fund expenses in the budget.
Right, so then what the descriptions are here is that it's pretty broad. They're pretty broad categories, and they could be used for these areas, and that was done by those that were in the meeting in December, and that was, who was that representing us? It was
Yeah, Mr. Figg and Mr. Sharkey.
Tom and John, okay, yeah.
And then Jess Herrera was the only Board of Commissioner member there that day.
And so, yeah, so the board, so what you have said, Mr. City Manager, is that their board has already signed off on this. That
That's
they've
correct.
approved all of this and they're really comfortable with the broad categories and no need to come back, but that we would have then the 100,000 as a joint effort to spend this.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Sharkey.
Yeah, has the Harbor District provided those funds? Are they in an account somewhere that we?
No, we're still on that same reimbursement basis. So we have to document the expense, and then the Harbor District reimburses those funds based on that documented expense.
So just to be clear, this is not an actual appropriation. This is an authorization to spend up to that amount.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So with that, you made a motion, correct? All right, so.
I'll second.
Second that?
Nobody has, yeah.
Pardon?
If nobody else has, I'll second. the
Okay,
motion.
there hasn't been a second yet, so, all right, so can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Fig?
Yes.
Councilmember Hensley?
No, I don't like the idea of spending and committing money to less definitive approaches to it. I think we should hold on.
Councilmember Sharkey?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Berg?
Yes.
Mayor Schnapp?
Yes. Okay, so with that, motion carries. We move on then to, where are we? C, first reading of ordinance for council meeting time change.
Yes,
Mr.
Mayor.
City Manager.
Yes, just a follow-up to another January 16 follow-up. We had the discussion about making some minor housekeeping changes that will eliminate some hassle with an extra agenda being produced the way we're doing our meetings now. The upshot of it all is that the official starting time of the meeting will be 5:30 p.m. Public meeting will not start, though, before 6:30 p.m., and that will all be clearly stated in the agendas. And there's an ordinance that has to be adopted to implement this. If the council was to approve this on first reading tonight, we would bring it back for second reading at the February 20th meeting. It would go into effect 30 days later, and the first meeting where this would actually be official would be that first meeting in April. So it's not as big a deal as it may have seemed at first, but it will save us the hassle of having to do that extra agenda that we are doing now for closed session.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember Hensley.
I move that we accept that as a motion.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is
And
there
a second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then we move on to item 11A. This is city attorney reports. Item 11A is resolution approving city council policy and procedures manual. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sent a new draft of council policy and procedures. I hope you had as much good time reading it as I did writing it. I have received comments from Councilmember Fig, and then this evening, Mayor Pro Tem Berg and I had a chance to partially go through it. And in our discussion, we were trying to figure out how to have a productive process for dealing with the various changes that all the council members may want to make. And this, in general, the process has to be conducted in public. But it could take a long time to get through all those changes. So what I was, we talked about it, and the idea that we came up with was that I would meet individually with each council member, receive their changes and go through them, and then I would prepare a report that says, you know, here are the changes requested, supported by this many council members, and then we would come back and you could act on that in public session, giving your reasons and so on. But that would minimize the amount of public session time that we would have to take going through minutia that nobody else would even understand.
Okay. So knowing that every city council has council norms of operation, and so at this point, we're just, really not wiping the slate clean, but we have had something in place, and these are the suggested changes in format that you have presented to us to consider.
Yes, I believe that the norms that were in place were adopted, I put it in I think it was 2001. They're clearly out of date.
I think we came back and did an update, though, a couple of years ago.
I couldn't find all the references, but
Yeah.
I knew there were a couple of amendments, but I wasn't sure exactly what occurred. One of the stated purposes of the norms is to educate new council members. And I think that's a very important function because these days council members are subject to fines and criminal prosecution and various other unpleasant procedures if they violate certain specific areas of the law. And I think it's all the more important that they have a source to be aware of that. It is my policy to always sit down with new incoming council members and alert them to some of the more key areas and discuss them with them. But it's really important, I think, for them to have a written material that they can resort to. Obviously, any council member can always consult with me in my office regarding issues that they have concerns about under the Brown Act, under the Political Reform Act, having to do with the running of campaigns, contributions, conflicts of interest, and that sort of thing. So this is a suggestion. It was deliberately intended to be overly inclusive so that the council would have choices. If you follow, you could see what other cities have done and say, no, I don't want to do that. And Mr. Figg has already provided a considerable thought into that and provided me with some input, but obviously everybody else needs to do the same. So with your permission, and at the suggestion of the Mayor Pro Tem, what we would suggest is that we continue the item and that I engage in a face-to-face meeting as your schedules permit. I don't think it would take more than maybe a half an hour maximum with each of you to go through what points you have concerns about, and some of which are my inattention to detail or inconsistencies, and then come back with a report sort of synthesized in the way that the city manager review was synthesized with the comments, and then you can vote on those changes, and we'll have a final document.
Okay. I know that when I tasked our city attorney to come up with something, certainly there were other things that kind of came between then and now.
Yeah, I kept sliding it down in priority, obviously.
Well, we were dealing with some other things, and so
yes, we were.
What I had first set of eyes after you had put everything together from gleaning from other cities and other reports that you did see. So I took the first set of eyes to take a look at it, and I felt it was important enough it looks good enough, send it on to everyone. So at this point, you're asking for half an hour possibly with each of us individually,
right. Yeah.
get feedback and coalesce all of that into a...
Yes, ma'am. It was never my thought that you just look at this and adopt it. I mean, there's obviously, you're going to have to live with the procedures. So I know that Mr. Berg had some concerns, and we talked about it, and Mr. Berg and Mr. Figg had some concerns, and so I want to get everybody's concerns, and then let's fine-tune the document as something that the majority of the council feels is a livable document to proceed in the future.
Okay, sounds
Move to
very
continue the
reasonable.
item.
Okay, very good.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
second? All right. And do we have to have a vote then for that?
I think you should, because
Yeah,
the motion
okay.
was made.
Okay, so could we have a roll call vote then?
Councilmember Figg?
Yes.
Councilmember Hensley?
Yes.
Councilmember Sharkey?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Berg?
Yes.
Mayor Schnapp?
Yes. All right, so motion carries. Thank you. And then we go on to that was the only item you had, Mr. City Attorney, okay? So then we go on to.
Each item is big, but I only have a few of them.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we are on to item number 12, council member reports, comments, and requests for future agendas. Yes, so we'll start over here. Councilmember Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to keep this brief here. One of the concerns that I've had ever since I've been on this council is to have effective video recording. I got a report that says our live streaming is still not functional tonight. It's buffering between the sound and the photographs, and I hope we're looking into that. Maybe we need more power in the pipeline coming down. I don't know what the circumstances are. Are we getting everything put out fairly on YouTube now so that it comes across? So I think the buffering probably will cease on the YouTube part, right?
Yeah, I think once we get the current web streaming, once we get the upgraded web streaming, which we definitely are evaluating different systems currently, I think our plan would be to go away from YouTube at that point, although I haven't confirmed that with our staff.
Yeah, I could care less. It could be YouTube or within the city. As far as being official, probably better in the city, but one of the things that I thought we were going to do, we set some money aside way back when, last year for it, is to upgrade our website. Number two, upgrade our TV. And we were supposed to get Skype. How are we coming along with Skype?
Skype, I think it's going to come down to an issue of how badly does the council want that? How often would we use it? It's doable, but I can't think of too many situations that we've had, at least in the last year, where we would have really needed that technology. So,
I've seen 2 or 3 in the past where somebody was off on a vacation and they could Skype, and then it also adds a measure in when we have a consultant somewhere else that can't make it. Skype is not that expensive. I mean, I don't see why we should try to forego the whole thing. It shouldn't be that far. And out of the $7,500, I'd like to have a report of how much has been spent so far, please.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sharkey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had the pleasure to attend the California Association of Sanitation Agencies Conference. Of interest to this body, there was a presentation by Professor Sendak from Berkeley, who wrote a book called Water 4.0, highly recommended reading. As we look at our situation with the wastewater treatment plant here, as you know, I've been advocating for 2 cities to get together and move forward. The industry is way past water treatment. Reclamation includes things like extracting useful chemicals, phosphorus, et cetera. A lot of discussion about the state requirement to divert organics, green waste, restaurant waste, all that sort of stuff away from landfills. Probably going to wind up going to water treatment plants. And if that happens, the potential for gas generation is also great. And I know Mr. Butler's had meetings with Oxnard staff. I know the folks over in Oxnard are in a pickle. But I think it's all the more important for those reasons to press forward and try and get something together with both our city councils and try to look forward. And I'll say it once again, we have the opportunity to provide for the needs of 250,000 people for the next 40 or 50 years. Or not, and it's that simple. With the groundwater management regimes that are coming down, there are no other sources of new water, and if we don't do this, shame on us. So I'll say that one more time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do you have anything? All right, do you have anything, Mayor Pro Tem Berg?
Yes, thank you very much. Last week I attended a SCAG transportation meeting. And just one of the issues that came up, the state has taken on a long-term study program about something called VMT, Vehicle Miles Traveled. And it's a tax, the transportation tax. It's unclear at this time whether it will be in place of our current gas tax or in addition to. Now, the intention is in place of. However, they estimate it's going to be at least another 10 years before they could potentially come up with something. But they had some interesting numbers, though. Right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our current tax per gallon of gasoline is 47.1 cents. The VMT they're proposing that they propose in their first study is 1.8 cents per mile traveled. So you can do the math now when you go home, when you gas up, how far can you drive on a full tank of gas? And if you were being charged 1.8 cents per mile versus being charged 47.1 cents per gallon. It's an interesting math question. Most people found that they actually saved money. It was less expensive. However, that means it was bringing in less revenue for the state. So we can't see the potential of them actually doing away with that gas tax at this time, but there's a lot of very excited people that are very concerned about that. They want to make sure that this gas tax would go away if they implement the vehicle miles traveled. Interesting concepts, though. What about people that come visit from Arizona and go to Disneyland? How do we track their vehicle miles traveled?
Right.
Think about it. You can't necessarily, but they say that Detroit is making automobiles now that can be tracked better in this manner. Also, trucks that might come in. I mean, the port every day sees trucks that are coming from out of state, picking up a load of bananas and not going to be back maybe for 3 months or maybe longer. But we want to be able to capture that revenue, vehicle miles traveled, when they're in the state. Picture also San Bernardino County, driving to Las Vegas or Laughlin. You've got a beautiful freeway there, 2-lane, and in some cases 3-lane freeway, and you're driving for hours out in the middle of the desert where there's nobody there generating tax dollars to maintain that road. That's where the vehicle miles traveled thing comes into play. It's very interesting conversations, and also Mayor Garcetti visited us that day because he announced the Los Angeles Olympics and talked about the Olympics being in 2028 in the city of Los Angeles. This will be the 3rd time. No city has had 3 Olympics before, so Los Angeles is very, very proud. Mayor Garcetti also, indicated that Los Angeles applies for the Olympics every 4 years. They're the only city that does it. Every 4 years, they put in their application. They would host it every 4 years if they could. It was an interesting talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Interesting about the VMT, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I have a couple of things here. Is that I was joined by some of the council colleagues for the 18th anniversary of the Alaska Airlines crash just recently. You know, it happens every year on the 31st, 18 years ago. The individuals who attended lost a family member, lost a friend. Many families have returned year after year, but many families have not. And so we had a really small gathering this year. But I know, as speaking to some of those who were there, they're looking forward to the 20th. Not necessarily is that they're really looking forward to it, but they would really encourage more of the families to come out and really more of a celebration of life of, you know, what their family members had contributed in the short amount of time that they've been gone, and certainly are missed year after year at this celebration. So that again is on the 31st every year here. And our beach happens to hold the Alaska Memorial in recognition of the crash here in the ocean. I did attend the League of California Cities Channel Counties meeting. The state of California is split up into 12 regions for the league, and our cities go from Paso Robles and Arroyo Grande up at the top all the way down to Thousand Oaks and Simi Valley, so you could see it's a widespread of area and cities. we had our president installed there, and she is from the city of Grover Beach, Miriam Shaw. First vice president is David Pollock from the city of Moore Park, and second vice president is Jason Dominguez from the city of Santa Barbara. And Fred Shaw, city of Carpinteria, is also part of our board. These are elected officials who are appointed to then and volunteer to then serve us in the Channel Counties, and they then have other duties in the state for the League of California Cities. One of the important things they talked about is they provided a soapbox at the end of our meeting, and this was last Friday, for what was learned from the Thomas Fire. And they had both Jason from Santa Barbara City Council and then Fred, who's the mayor of Carpinteria, put together some really short presentation about what they found. I don't know if you all know this, but in Carpinteria, they had no electricity for 2 days. And so what it meant is they didn't have media coming in. They didn't know what had happened outside their area unless they had a hand crank, radio. If you did not have cash, you couldn't use your ATM card. You couldn't go to the store to buy anything. You had to have cash. And then everybody who was at those stores could only really give cash back. It was just a cash society. And so they learned quite a bit there. With Santa Barbara, of course, we know that they're still digging through all this. Montecito is unincorporated, so it really doesn't belong in the city of Santa Barbara, but so many people were affected and affected more. And so my takeaway in this is that to continue to work with our police department in terms of emergency information and services and all of that. Redundancy is really good. Making sure that our power lines are in the ground versus up at the, up in the air is probably a very good thing to continue in the community. And so on and so forth. And also they found out that they really needed quite a bit of Spanish language information going out, and they know that that was a really big hiccup in the Santa Barbara area. And first responders are awesome people. I know that there continues to be bucket brigades of folks that are coming from Ventura County and helping out, actually help people in Montecito dig out the mud from their homes, cut trees that have come in through their house, et cetera. They're not free and clear right now. There's quite a bit of effort going on at this point. And so many things that were highlighted. That doesn't mean that we plan for an emergency, but we're prepared for an emergency. And so with that, I just want to make sure that, we continue to move forward on some of these efforts that we have undertaken.
Madam
Yes.
Mayor, thanks for that.
Your microphone, though, I think is off.
Thank you so much. And that's enlightening. Thank you for sharing that, particularly about the cash problems, the ATMs and other communication devices. In the beginning of the statement, I'm not sure, I wanted to clarify in my own mind, did you say Grover City or Grover Beach?
For the president, city of Grover Beach.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to emphasize that, Grover Beach.
Yeah, yes, Grover
And the changes
Beach.
from what it used to be when it was
Right.
Grover City.
Yeah. Right. All right. Yes.
Yeah, Madam,
Councilmember Shirky.
you just reminded me, because I did see a presentation on Santa Rosa Fire, and we have our community development director and police chief here. One of the things they found, there was a Kmart up there that had a large external fire hydrant, internal sprinkler system and all that, which worked fine on the interior, but the connections on the outside burned away, and they wound up with 8-inch water mains just spewing water all over the place and losing water pressure, indicating that perhaps there needs to be a rethink on how these fire hydrants are hooked up to the buildings from the outside. But that, that's something to put in your knowledge as we move forward. I don't anticipate that kind of fire here, but think about what happens if that main breaks or if it burns from the outside and pipes melt, things like that. Then you've got a major loss of water pressure. So, interesting point.
So a couple other takeaways is they suggest that everybody have a go bag, something that's already packed that you can just grab and go. List of things that if you had, an opportunity to go into your house and pack some things, you have a list already prepared. They were saying inform people as to where you are, and then they also felt that there was miscommunications out there between different departments, different agencies, who's on first, what's going on, et cetera, and they felt all of that was very confusing, and so they would advise that there would be one source in order for reporting to be really clear for folks. All right. So with that, if there are no other further questions, comments, or future agenda items, we'll move on to item 13, which is continuation of open forum. So we'll continue to hear public comments on things that are not on the agenda. Seeing no one stepping up to the podium for this, then we already did our closed session for the night. So with that, we will adjourn to the next regular meeting to be held Tuesday, February 20th. That's a special date because we're celebrating President's Day on Monday. So it's going to be Tuesday, February 20th here at 6:30. Thank you.